This talk, my name is Laszlo Gombos. I work for Samsung. I work in the web platform team. And the goal of this talk is twofold. One is talk a little bit about how web is deployed across all Samsung devices. So that's kind of a general overview. And then secondly, I want to specifically go and deep dive into Samsung's Android browser. So the motivation for this talk, and I hope what you get out of this, is that you realize that Samsung is working really hard to try to make every product that's sensible to enable it for the web. Also, we believe that the market doesn't need another web engine. We believe that we can be successful moving the web forward using existing open source web engines. And as part of that, we're working with the open source community to improve those engines the way we'd like it to be improved. And lastly, I hope you get away with the learning here that Samsung Web is everywhere, and you should consider testing your web content and your web applications in Samsung devices as well, perhaps right after Safari and Google Chrome, especially on mobile. So a little overview about what I hope to cover. Like I mentioned, I'm going to touch on most of Samsung's consumer devices. Secondly, I'm going to deep dive into our open source contributions, which is mostly in WebKit and Chromium, and talk a little bit about our standardization efforts at WSGC. And then lastly, talk about our Android browser. So the main message that's coming up here is that not only we have web-enabled products, but we actually try to keep it really up-to-date and really fresh and have the latest HTML5 features in them. So I know this table is a little overwhelming, but the whole point is to try to collect in one slide what are the web-enabled products and how we exactly enable web in those products. So I want to go through them one by one. So the first one is Galaxy Mobile. It is running Android. It comes in pre-installed browsers. And in addition to that, you have hybrid as another option, where you develop your content still with web technologies, but perhaps you want to wrap it in some sort of hybrid wrapper so that you can put it in the web store and have it available that way as well. And you can either just use your WebView directly from Java, or you can use off-the-shelf open source project like Cordova or Crosswalk to wrap your content. And I'm going to talk about those a little later. Another option, another product category from Samsung is Tizen Mobile that runs Tizen. It also comes with a browser pre-installed from Samsung. It also has the hybrid option. But in addition to that, packaged web apps are first-class citizens in Tizen Mobile. What that means is that you don't necessarily have to deal with hybrid environments. You can actually just do all the way web, and we take care of the wrapping for you. It is following the WCC widget specification in terms of how you wrap your content. Chromebooks are naturally running Chrome OS. Here, you don't have a hybrid option. Your options are just browser and packaged web apps. Here, packaging is not WCC widget. It's something that's specific to Chrome OS. Smart TVs, as you've probably seen in many of other sessions, are also going to run Tizen. So you more or less have the same options as on Tizen Mobile, except here you, again, not going to have your hybrid option. So you either just make your content available in the browser on the smart TV, or you're going to write packaged web app, which is largely or exactly compatible with Tizen Mobile. Tizen Gear is the watch category, and perhaps a little surprising to you, but it actually also has web in it. It has the same packaged web app infrastructure than Smart TVs and Tizen Mobile. One big difference there is that because of the hardware limitation, we had to cut down a little bit on the web platform features. It's still the latest, greatest web platform, but the two big features that we disabled in that engine is SVG and WebRTC. They are fairly large features, and we feel like they're not necessarily essential on a watch. You should be just be aware of that. And the Wear category from Google that's running Android Wear actually doesn't have web in it. Essentially, your only option there is Android Java. Few words about Tizen. I really don't want to spend too much time on this. There's many sessions on Tizen. What you should remember is that it's an open source project. It is a web-centric platform. Web is a first-class citizen on Tizen. And then it comes with many profiles that are targeting different device categories, such as mobile, TV, wearable, and IVR, which is in-car devices, in-car entertainment. Samsung is spending a lot of effort making the Tizen web environment a first-class development platform. So we have SDKs, emulators, but at the same time, you can use the same web inspector that you already hopefully know and love from Chrome. And if you've seen Tizen before, I encourage you to look at it again, because we're spending a lot of effort converting Tizen proprietary APIs to WCC standard APIs. The standards has evolved in the last few years, and that's what makes this a possibility now. It just simply wasn't an option a few years back. Apache Cordova, I hope you know this project very well. It's one of the leading options for hybrid applications. So essentially, the output of an Apache Cordova project is a native application. But you can do most of your development using web technologies. And Cordova creates binding to some of the device APIs where the web platform doesn't have a device API. But here again, a lot of the device APIs are going to be available in the browser as well. So the Cordova extensions are getting less and less interesting. Another important point about Cordova is that it's cross-platform across Samsung. So you can target Android and Tizen devices with Cordova. Crosswalk is a new project. It's also open source. At this point, mostly driven by Intel. It is a very similar idea and concept as Apache Cordova. The one big difference here is that Crosswalk comes with its own web engine. It's actually built on top of Chromium. And if you'd like, you can package your own custom web engine inside your app and essentially shape a web platform that's tailored to your app together with Crosswalk. People use it to target older Android devices that don't necessarily have the latest web view in them. So that way you have the latest features even on older devices. And you have to worry less about your engine fragmentation because you're shipping the engine yourself. So the last segment is about Samsung's open source contribution. The key takeaway here is that we really work with the community to move the web forward. So our WebKit contribution is largely targeted around our WebKit port. So in WebKit land, there are many ports. The main primary port is Apple's Safari port, which is targeting macOS and iOS and Windows. The second largest port at this point is EFL WebKit, which is Samsung's port of WebKit to EFL, and is targeting Linux and Tizen devices. So we do EFL WebKit development in the public. It's all there available in webkit.org. And because we do this contribution, Samsung is the second largest contributor to WebKit at the moment. Our main use of WebKit is on the lower end devices. It is the engine that's running inside Samsung Gear. And while WebKit itself is very scalable, EFL WebKit is mostly targeted low-end devices. This is a little overview about our Chromium contributions. Chromium is another open source project. One big difference between WebKit and Chromium is that Chromium is really an entire browser, whereas WebKit is just an engine. On Chromium, Samsung is also the second largest contributor right after Google, but Chromium at the moment is a little bit more healthier ecosystem in that there are many other companies involved in Chromium, such as Opera, Intel, Adobe, Igalia, Yandex, NVIDIA, ARM. I haven't listed it there. There are a few blog posts that I encourage you to read about the whole Chromium ecosystem and Samsung's involvement. Just to quantify a little bit, what does it mean to be the second largest contributor in the project is that we have 30 plus active committers. Committers are essentially people who earn the right to commit code to the Chromium project. In terms of just the unique authors and people having patches in the project, we already have 100 plus people. And yeah, there's a link to the list of orders. In the number of commits, code contributions that Samsung made in the last year or so is over 3,500. This sounds an incredibly large number, but actually the Chromium project itself moves very fast, so this is still just a fragment of the entire project commits. So we have experts in core layout and rendering, SVG, and gamepad. So this 3,500 commits sounds great, but what are actually the features that Samsung worked on? Here is a list. I don't necessarily have time to go in great length of what these specifications do or what these features do, so I encourage you to look that up. Perhaps I talk a little bit about why Samsung chose these features and why we work on this area. Gamepad and screen orientation is quite important for gaming, and we felt that we really need to move the gaming side of things forward in the web. Canvas is also in that category. CSS shapes enables magazine style layout, like you can see on the slide. Essentially, the text can nicely curve around an image, and you can just do this now with a few lines of CSS. You don't have to do any JavaScript magic, which also means it's performing very well. Samsung is also involved moving the developer tools within the open source project forward. And then we're working on features like HTML5 context menu. We feel that's quite important to have a very seamless web and native integration so that you can have your web driven context menu that still looks native, for example, on Android. This slide is specifically about our Canvas contributions. Like I said, this is important for 2D gaming. So again, just to reiterate, when we work on these features in open source, essentially we're enabling every browser that is using the Chromium engine with these features. So when Samsung contributes to Canvas, those features then immediately available on the Opera browser, on Google's Chrome browser, on the Yandex browser, and in the Samsung browser, every browser that's using the Chromium engine. In terms of our focus for standardization, we largely involved in two working groups, the web application working group and the system application working group. The web application working group is really trying to focus on web applications, not so much on document authoring. So these upcoming specifications like service worker, web push, and web manifest are really filling the gap between native and web. I'm going to have a slide on service worker itself. This is really something that you should look into because it's coming and it's going to disrupt the web a little bit. The system application working group was set up to try to standardize some of the Tizen-specific device APIs. This is going a little bit slower as we hoped, as it's really hard to get traction to other vendors in the space, and we don't want to just standardize something that's then only used in Samsung products. Service Worker is essentially a daemon that somewhat controversially runs outside the browser. It is still a browser feature, but it can run essentially independently from a web page. So a service worker doesn't have an associated DOM. You don't write CSS. You just write a piece of JavaScript that's kind of a headless daemon. And what it can do for you is it's essentially a mini HTTP proxy that's designed to enhance your page. Or it's designed to do background synchronization better offline, or listen to web push messages and wake up your web page when it needs to be woken up. This is something that native applications routinely do, but we had no option to do it in the web up until now. So Google, Mozilla is already committed to this work together with Samsung, and we're trying to sign up other major vendors to have this feature cross-platform. And we feel that this is going to be a major advancement in the web. And like I said before, Samsung is intimately involved in this work. We are co-editing the specification. Again, I just wanted to show a concrete example where Samsung is moving the web forward, even though we don't have our own web engine. So this last section talks about our Android product. Hopefully you've seen it before, but perhaps you don't know too much about it, so I'm here to talk about it a little more. That's the icon that you see in the phone. So just looking back, Samsung has been actually working on mobile browsers for quite a while now. Initially, this was branded as Dolphin. Later, it was based on the Android stock browser. And then today, it's essentially a completely independent browser. So when you get your Samsung Galaxy mobile device, you might not consciously recognize this up until this point, but it actually comes with 3 independent copies of the web. So one copy is for the web view. That's represented by that little Android icon there. It's basically for hybrid apps and for Java apps to fulfill the promise of the Java API compatibility. The middle application is Google Chrome, which comes also on Samsung Galaxy devices. And then lastly, that's the icon for the Samsung mobile browser. All these browsers are independently updated. And just starting from Android 5.0, even the web view gets updated independently from system updates. We call this the evergreen web view. And it's great because the moment we land something in the Chromium open source project, it's not only going into browsers, but it's also going to the web view. So a little overview about the Samsung browser. As I said, it's based on the Chromium engine. Samsung is really focusing on performance, power, and memory optimizations when we put together our browser. We try to limit the web exposed changes. Sometimes we do a few, but that's not the major driver for the browser. We hope to do all of our web exposed changes in open source. And because of that, we don't have yet another vendor prefix that you have to deal with. It's just the same old WebKit prefix or no prefix. And the Samsung browser itself is detectable via the user agent string. If you really want to do that, I don't encourage user agent detection in general. But I wanted to highlight that Samsung browser is often misidentified as Chrome in some of the statistics or some of the analytics that people do the server side. So just be aware of that. Another area where we focus on the Samsung browser is the actual user experience of the browser, the Chrome part of the browser. So that's, of course, deeply integrated with the Galaxy user experience. Things like multi-window or perhaps hardware features like S Pen is really key features of the Samsung browser. And then we have a specific page for pre-installed bookmarks, which is an opportunity to partner and work together to have perhaps different pre-installed bookmarks based on regions. So at this point, you might ask, why another browser? We already have so many browsers on Android. And the answer is that we really believe that we need to move the web forward to compete with native applications. And the only way to move the web forward is to create a healthy competition between browser vendors. And as such, we believe that we should give another choice for consumers to have another browser. It also creates us a platform to increase the performance of the web, because we can do customizations that are specific to Samsung hardware. It's something that's very hard to do if you don't have your own browser. When Samsung is doing some hardware innovation, then we can immediately tie that to a browser. And essentially, we can push the hardware and the browser and the web forward together. So I want to show you all of these features that I mentioned one by one. So one of the areas that we're really focusing on is how the user interact with the web page within the browser. So one of the unique features we have is a little magnifier that helps you touch on various sections of the page. We are capable of doing multiple text selection within one page. That means that a selection doesn't have to be continuous. Another feature, a unique feature that we have is a reader mode. So consumers can just read the text and inline images on the web page without a lot of the distractions that's going on the page. And then lastly, we spend a lot of time trying to improve navigation and form filling of the web page. So one of the things we have is on the virtual keyboard, we have a previous and next button to fill out the forms one by one without interacting with the page itself. So because we have these unique features in Samsung browser, you might need to be aware that end users are interacting with your page slightly differently than other browsers. But generally, we're not breaking the web. This is still web compliant. Multitasking is another area where Samsung is innovating on the Android platform. This, of course, is best used in a larger screen. But the Samsung browser is taking full advantage of this multitasking, and you can run even 3 independent copies of the browser on the same screen if you really like to. One use case where this is important is dragging and dropping content between windows. It's much harder to do, or it's not possible to do if you don't have several windows. Our S Pen integration is, of course, superb. Many other browsers in Android doesn't have S Pen integration. And one of the cool features about S Pen is that it can actually emulate and fire the hover event, which is something that's not readily available if all you have is touch. Another unique feature of the Samsung browser is the Knox integration. This is largely for enterprises and IT administrators. But the main takeaway here is that if you have a need to customize a browser and perhaps lock it down for IT needs, then the answer is the Samsung browser. We also spend a lot of time on security. One of the key features of Samsung browser is the fingerprint integration. That means that you can, consumers can log in into their website without entering username and password every time. Hopefully, this makes a browser a safer environment for all of us, but it's also, you perhaps have to be less worried about your services being attacked or users being compromised because of this. And then lastly, I hope you saw the presentation about Flow, the keynote yesterday. This is an area where we focus on. We believe that the Samsung Android browser is kind of a hub for your other devices. So we're working on enabling syncing notifications across devices, easily share URLs between devices, and sync your bookmarks and open tabs between devices. We're even working on syncing with other desktop browsers such as Firefox. So again, the takeaway here is that there's a lot of features that makes the Samsung browser attractive for consumers. And if you don't test on Samsung browsers, your content likely works, but just be aware that a lot of your users might be hitting your content through the Samsung browser. I mentioned previously that we focus on performance. I just wanted to quantify that a little bit better. This is a chart that shows the latest Samsung browser, version 2.0, against Chrome. These benchmarks are largely focused on JavaScript performance. As you can see, the blue line is a little higher everywhere. On SunSpider, the gain is huge, I would say. So the key takeaway here is if you have an application that requires a lot of power, perhaps it's not optimized yet, or perhaps it's just really JavaScript heavy, you might want to try Samsung browser first, because maybe there it runs much faster before you start optimizing it for other browsers. This is just the map, the Samsung browser versions to the Chromium engine versions. So there's a lot of documentation out there what the Chromium engine supports and how it evolves. So if you want to have some idea of how that maps into Samsung browsers, this is your answer. So for example, Samsung Browser 2.0, that was pre-installed on the Galaxy Note 4 device, is based on Chromium version 34. This is the user agent string. Like I said, please don't detect that. We don't necessarily encourage customizing your web page to the Samsung browser. But if you need to for analytics reasons or for other reasons, this is how you detect it. So the key elements of this is if you see Samsung in the device section of the user agent thing, that's not only means that the request is coming from a Samsung device, it actually means that it's coming from the Samsung browser. And then this is the version number of the Samsung browser. Chrome 34 stands for the engine version that's inside the Samsung browser. And mobile indicates that it is coming from essentially a non-tablet device. So on the last row, you're seeing a request coming from the Galaxy Tab Pro, from an S browser, that doesn't have the mobile keyword in it. So that's how you know to serve essentially for a larger screen size. In the middle, that's a user agent string for something that we call the desktop view. And users can flip this flag, and then as browser and also other browsers, they essentially pretend to be a Linux desktop browser, hoping that you're serving a desktop content for that request. This is how we enable end users to see the desktop grade websites in the browser. So these are the new web expose features in the latest Samsung Browser 2.0 that was released with Node 4. Again, I don't have time to go into details about all these features. It just demonstrates how the speed of innovation that's still happening in the web platform. I would perhaps emphasize from this list web components, responsive images, and some of the gaming-related APIs, such as Vibration API and Gamepad API. A little bit more on the Gamepad itself, or gaming itself. So the hardware you're seeing there is a Samsung product. There's a link where you can learn a little bit more about the Samsung Gamepad. But with this device and the Samsung Android mobile device, you can essentially enjoy web-based games because we expose the Gamepad key events to web pages. And also, you can log the screen orientation to have the ideal orientation for your game. These are our future plans for the Samsung browser. We feel it's very important that we keep it up to date with the latest engine. We have several different mechanisms to update the browser. One is together with an operating system update. Another one is just an independent maintenance or security update. And then lastly, we can just do a new application release. In terms of our release plans, we plan to make slightly less releases than the Chrome engine itself. Chromium has releases seven or eight major releases every year. We feel this is perhaps a little bit overwhelming. So we only targeting 2 to 4 major releases every year. And we also plan to align these releases with new hardware releases. So as we might announce new Galaxy mobile devices, we might, together with that, announce new Samsung browser versions as well. So I focused quite a lot about our end users features of the Samsung browser. I felt that this is important for you to understand. But I want to spend a little bit more time explaining why the Samsung browser is important for you as a developer. I want to reiterate that Samsung browser is great for testing your needy web applications that's perhaps JavaScript heavy, not only because we spend a lot of time optimizing the Samsung browser, but also Samsung hardware is great for performance. When people are interacting with your website on the Samsung browser, you should expect very complex user interactions with your content. This goes for selecting content, perhaps reading your content in reader mode, or perhaps even saving your pages offline for later read. This is something that end users routinely do in our browser, and you should be aware of that. In terms of customizing for the web engine, we don't encourage that. We really try to work with other browser vendors and in the open source community that you don't have to do a lot of extra work just for a Samsung browser. For the most part, it should just work. Samsung browser gives you partnering opportunities. That's our quick access page where we have a few links pre-installed. That's something you can take advantage of it if you like. And we really would like to have an open channel with developers to move the web forward. Samsung is in a position to implement these features that perhaps you're missing today from the web platform. So as an example, we released Samsung Edge that if you haven't seen, has a curved glass edge on one side. And this opens up innovations also in the web platform. So someone might ask, how can I take advantage of that edge from the browser, from within a web page? Is that perhaps a good place for notifications? So we encourage you to come back to us with feedback, what you're missing from the web platform, or what might be useful to create a little bit more customized experience on Samsung devices and the Samsung browser. So in summary, I really want to open up the communication, and I want to emphasize that Samsung wants to work with web developers. We extending and embracing the existing web, working with the community. We going into great length of making web platform available in every devices, even in devices such as the Samsung Gear. And Samsung has another option on Galaxy devices to create a choice, create an environment for healthy competition with other vendors. And we really committed to move the web platform forward. I hope you had that feeling while going through the specifics of the presentation. And with that, I want to open it up for a Q&A. So I think we have 2 mics.
Hi. So you mentioned that you have a mixed bag of use of WebKit and Chromium on different devices, and you mentioned that Tizen currently uses the EFL WebKit port. What is the current status of the different engines being used on different devices? Because we've had mixed results detecting determining whether a certain device runs Chromium or a different version of WebKit. So do you have a survey of all of the versions available on different devices and whether or not you're planning to use Chromium in the future on Tizen as well?
Right. So I'm not really in a position to comment on future products, but perhaps we can go over the list of products that are already released, and I can clarify what are the engines in them, if I find the slide. So on Galaxy mobile devices, it's always Chromium. It always has been, and it's going to stay that way. Same for Chromebooks. So the question really, I guess, targeting Tizen. So many of the existing Tizen products are based on WebKit, based on EFL WebKit. And we do have plans, as it has been announced, to move some of those devices to Chromium. I cannot necessarily say that we're going to be able to do that for all Tizen devices. For example, for something like the Gear, Chromium might be a little bit too heavy. We're obviously interested in aligning our R&D efforts. So from that perspective, the same engine everywhere would be great. But we also have to make sure that the product requirements are all met. So, I mean, if you're writing web content where you have to make a choice between Chromium and WebKit for whatever reason, and I hope that's not the case. But for future products, then I would try to target Chromium.
Well, the problem we're facing right now is that we deal with intensive graphical operations using DOM transforms, CSS transforms, and the reason why I ask this is because certain devices, maybe even certain builds of WebKit bundled with different devices, have different issues with the same feature.
Right.
And it would help a lot if we had a survey of different devices and different versions that coupled to either specific versions of WebKit or Chromium for us to investigate in, or maybe target to avoid those bugs. Right.
I mean, you can make the same point of, open source engines, that certain versions of Chrome behave differently. So, yeah, I don't really know how to handle that problem. I mean, I would really encourage you to share those problems with us in release products, we might have an opportunity to update those and essentially just fix those performance issues or whatever issues you have.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hi. I've been trying to develop VR applications using the WebGL. Kind of a lot of challenges. So obviously, Samsung is launching Gear VR in a couple weeks. Web content is going to be hard for that. There's a lot of solutions. Do you have any plans for helping web content and VR come together?
Sure. So I can't specifically outline or plan going forward, but we're certainly looking at that as one area for pushing the web forward. I guess in terms of the graphics engine, you can do a lot of the processing already today with WebGL. So perhaps the biggest issue is how to expose the head motion and some of the sensor data to the web, right? Yeah, we don't, it's also very new to us. Some of this innovation first happens on the native side, and then we move it towards the web. I'd love to chat with you after the session to see what are your thoughts on making this happen. Yeah. Any other questions? You guys feel this was useful? So I was asked to reinforce that please give feedback of the session. And I want to just bring up the session ID so that you can find it. There you go. So please fill out the survey if there is no more questions. Thank you.